the Entrepreneurs at Scale podcast. We're joined by Martyn Dawes, an award-winning serial entrepreneur, CEO, and board-level advisor with a track record of building high-growth businesses and delivering standout shareholder returns. Martyn is best known as the founder and former CEO of Coffee Nation. The business created the category of self-serve gourmet coffee. He launched the company in 1997, secured private equity growth capital in 2000, led it through rapid scale, and then stayed on as a non-exec through to a sale in 2008. He picked up many awards, UK's fastest growing company, Ernst & Young's UK Entrepreneur of the Year. And then in 2008, exited and delivered a 4x return to institutional investors. Also the author of Wake Up and Sell the Coffee. And now Martyn works with founders, CEOs, boards, advisors, mentors, and business leaders, all sorts. So Martyn, you're very welcome.
Morning, Neil. Thank you for having me on your podcast. Really looking forward to it.
Yeah. So let's just go right back to founding Coffee Nation. What originally pulled you into founding the company? What problem are you trying to solve, or why were you the person trying to solve it?
That's a good question. It certainly wasn't about coffee to start with.
Right.
I had a small consulting business, which was off the back of my background in engineering and so on, but wanted to do something perhaps bigger with a product and a brand. And the first insight came from reading an article in a business magazine about a photocopier company that put photocopiers into drugstores, convenience stores, etc. A US-based company, a very big business, listed on NASDAQ, and they had 30,000 photocopiers in these stores around the world. And now, of course, nobody ever photocopies anything. But in the mid-90s, the idea was you go into a store, photocopy whatever, and you pay your money, and the shopkeeper would obviously get that revenue, but it would also work as a footfall driver. So whilst you're in the store, you'd spend money on something else. And the company, they were called TRM. They owned the photocopiers, they serviced them, maintained them, provided all the consumables, etc. And then operated on a revenue share business model. And I thought, wow, there's a lot of small shops in Britain. If I could find another product to put into corner shops, as were in the UK on that model, on that arrangement, I could get a little bit of revenue from lots of locations, kind of thing. And I thought could be on something. But the question was, what was going to be the product? And the coffee idea then came about because I went to the US. I figured that lots of good business ideas start in the US and come to the UK, and I saw takeaway coffee in 7-Eleven stores in Manhattan, pour over filter jug sort of coffee, $1 a cup, flying out the door. And I thought, that's it. And this was all really completely unrelated to the coffee bar culture that was virtually non-existent in the mid-90s. So that's how it started.
Yeah. And what other spark did you get from being in America? I mean, just, we can kind of come back with all sorts. I mean, why was it coffee that was the one that kind of really floated your boat?
I think there was, in the back of my mind, there was something about sort of food and beverage out of home, food on the move, takeaway food, if you like, was sort of starting to be a category in the UK. The supermarket chains were opening convenience stores. They just started with that, I think, like Sainsbury's Local, Costa Express. So I think these were, I'm not saying they were sort of clear-cut thoughts, but I think these are thoughts floating around for me. As I say, the coffee bar culture didn't really exist at that time. But I figured, well, if it works in the US, it'll probably work in the UK.
Yeah.
Takeaway culture was sort of developing, better quality food on the move.
Right. So you've got this great idea. You're going to do coffee on the move in the UK. So what happens next?
What happens next was I had to find some coffee machines.
Right.
And when I was in America, I actually got out the phone book, the Yellow Pages, as was, and went to coffee machines and literally called the first company in the book, for a quarto. They were called a quarto, and I rang them, and they sent the sales rep out to meet me. And in a big van, he rocked up with this huge espresso machine in the back of the van and incredible coffee. But the coffee machine was incredibly expensive, like $14,000, $15,000. And I figured, well, A, it was too big, B, it was too complicated,
Yeah.
C, it was way too expensive. So I figured I needed something much smaller and easier to put into a newsagent in the UK, and it had to be a self-serve machine.
Yeah.
So I came back and did some research in the UK and found a little company out in the West Country that produced sort of tabletop machines. You'd fill the canister with instant coffee, powdered milk, and then it would whisk this all together with water, and it called it a cappuccino, and that's how it started. And I had a unit built that it sat on with a cup dispenser and a slot for lids and sugars and so on. And I approached Nestle, who own Nescafe, and of course most people drank instant coffee at the time. There weren't coffee bars really. So Nestle were very keen to do a deal with me whereby they'd supply the ingredients, the branding of the machines, and they also were aware of food on the move, and they'd seen takeaway coffee in America and how important it was to convenience stores in the States, and figured they'd like to develop this in the UK, and they liked my business model. So that's how it started. Little tabletop machines, instant coffee, corner shops. Yeah.
Well, I sense it probably wasn't all plain sailing. There were a few barriers to growing your fledgling business. What were they?
To say the least. It was not short of a complete disaster. The first thing was corner shops, British, typical news agents. They weren't sophisticated retailers at all. Many of the shops were, they weren't well managed or merchandised. Not even particularly clean in many cases. And of course, I was trying to sell something as well that people had no idea that they'd want to buy. So I was really trying to take people in a completely new direction, which is extremely difficult. And so sales were next to zero to start with. And so I thought, okay, I need to get into sort of more organized retailers. I approached Spar, who are the convenience group. And again, they were very interested. They liked the idea. They particularly liked the idea that I would own the kit, and I would provide all the consumables and so on, and the coffee and the powdered milk and the cups and what have you. And there was no upfront cost for the retailer for their individual shops. They didn't actually buy the machines, so they liked it. And I also approached another company called All Days, who are a convenience store group. So both of those. Bit with the idea and ran with it. So I went from sort of corner shops to better quality convenience stores. Having said that, there were still neighbourhood stores.
Yeah.
So again, I had this problem because most people would go into these shops to buy a pint of milk, loaf of bread, a newspaper, whatever. And what I was selling, they could kind of make at home by putting the kettle on. So my sales grew, but probably never more than like 40 or 50 cups a week.
Yeah.
So I was never going to light the fire with this,
Right.
and I was trying to raise some money at the same time.
You started to build out your value proposition, you're trying to get a bit of traction. How did you keep innovating to the point where you got something that you could scale?
I think this is a very good question. I think that I was quite disciplined in that I kept trying to work on the business, if you like, as opposed to just running it. And albeit it was a very tiny business, I spent a lot of time servicing the individual stores. I had, at one point, I think I had 30 of these instant coffee machines dotted around the UK in various Spar and all day shops. And that was a key lesson that, obviously, looking back in hindsight, I then realised I was learning, which was I'd tried to grow a business before I'd proven it.
Mm-hmm.
And I had also agreed to have all these machines all over the UK, which pleased the customer. It was what Spar and All Days Central wanted as such. But it was very difficult to manage because I spent all my time driving around these locations. But in parallel with that, I was working on, okay, how do I grow sales? What is wrong?
Yeah.
What am I missing?
Yeah.
And And that was a long process, Neil, and money was getting tight. Revenue was slim as well, and it was actually at the 11th hour when I figured I was going to need to wind this up because I just couldn't find the answer. I tried everything to increase sales of the coffee, including giving away free newspapers or pastries or whatever. And it was a chance encounter when I went to one of my stores, and a customer came in, and I thought he was going to buy a coffee, and he didn't. But he came up to me and he said, "Are you something to do with this coffee machine?" I said, "Yes, it's my business." And he said, "I think it's a great idea." He said, "But what you're selling, I can make in my office with putting a kettle on and a jar of Nescafe and a pint of milk." And he said, "If you want to sell this kind of product in this location, you've got to wow me with the product." And it literally was the 11th hour because I was thinking I got to wind things up. And that was my real breakthrough eureka moment. And it sounds like it was a stroke of luck. But as my chairman said to me sometime later, who I'd not even met at that point, he said, "We make our own luck, you know, to some degree. Harder you work, the luckier you get, kind of thing." And I was just dogged and determined not to give up. And it was that breakthrough that made me see that what I got wrong was I'd put cost as number one priority.
Mm.
And because the espresso machines I'd seen in America were jolly expensive, I figured, well, there's no way that I could justify the price of a cup of coffee that ultimately would pay for the machine.
Yeah.
And I got it completely wrong. What I needed to do was have a great product, charge a higher price, and therefore the messaging would be this is a premium product, and therefore the costs kind of would take care of themselves. So I was sort of elated, but at the same time I knew I was sort of out of cash and I needed to move fast. So I secured 4 little bean to cup machines that grind the beans, steam the milk fresh. Refitted 4 of the Nescafe machines with the bean to cup machines. Put the Coffee Nation name up. Put the drink price up as well, and the sales took off literally. And I was soon selling sort of 1,000 cups a month from these 4 locations. So at that point, I thought, right, nobody's putting a gun to these people's heads. I'm onto something.
The job that needs to be done, that I guess that person who was giving you the consumer feedback that you really needed, i.e., I can do this at home or in the office, it needs to wow me. What lessons did you take out from that? Because you must have been working so hard to try and get something that was going to be able to scale. What how did that sort of really crystallize? Because you must have come back and just had to think about that, that conversation.
I think that I think what I was realizing was that you to launch a business and to grow it successfully, you've got to really be either solving a problem or that's
Yeah,
real and that's
yeah,
meaningful, and that people are willing to change their behavior
yeah,
for. And I think also, and I see this a lot with entrepreneurs today, many start businesses and they get a few customers,
mm,
but it's not people try, they'll buy to try, but to actually start something that's really going to scale and really going to grow, it's got to wow people. You can't, you need a queue around the block kind of thing as well.
yeah, yeah. Well, I guess Howard Schultz knows a thing about it or two from Starbucks
Indeed,
and
and,
how
and of course, the whole coffee bar culture, which in those days was in its absolute infancy, that all came from taking people in a complete new direction. Italian espresso
yeah,
uh,
yeah,
in an appealing sort of modern, fresh format in the US. But it's also, Neil, it takes a long time.
yeah,
Starbucks, he started that in 1971 or
yeah,
73, I think. Likewise, when I started Coffee Nation, Pret a Manger had launched in the late 80s.
yeah,
But it takes a long time.
yeah, yeah.
Um, so it's the opportunity can be significant, but taking people in a new direction is
So you now kind of justified your value proposition. You figure that out. How do you then go sort of really scale? Coffee Nation? What was the next steps you had to do in providing people?
Yeah, so I
and all
needed some
that?
money then, to get myself out of a hole. But now I'd got the proof from these 4 locations that I had got an opportunity that enabled me to raise some seed capital. And it was at the time, this was at the height of the dot-com boom, so all the dot-coms were sucking up the money. But
Yeah.
I think it was quite good because people understood my business, and I had revenue. And so the seed capital enabled me then to further develop the concept. I went back to the company in America, and struck an agreement with them to use their machines. And these were much bigger, very capable machines with an onboard milk refrigerator, etc. And they're very easy to adapt for self-serve use. We then developed what we call the concession unit, which was the sort of the shop front that wrapped around the coffee machine, so it became a destination in the store. And then the other side of the coin was to then go out and approach even bigger retailers with more high foot traffic en route type locations.
Yeah.
And the first 2 companies that agreed to sign up were Welcome Break on the motorways and Texaco forecourts. And they both loved the idea, and they said, "Yeah, we'll do trials with you." We did the trials. Again, it was another, I think, four locations, and they weren't selling coffee in any of these locations.
Right.
And literally sales skyrocketed. So they both agreed to roll out contracts, and then I needed the money to do that. So that's when we raised private equity funding, £4 million, and that enabled us to really roll out and start growing the company.
Wow. So private equity comes in. What changes happen to the culture, the feeling of the business when private equity comes in?
Well, it was although it was private, it was a private equity firm.
Yeah.
It was, we were in essence a very early stage business. So we proved the model, we proved the concept, we had contracts ready to roll out, but we were a tiny fledgling team. So really everything had to be built, right from scratch. So the field ops team, the brand standards, everything. We had to set up the maintenance of how we'd maintain the each location, training the staff on site, and so on. So it was literally everything. Where we were going to be based, and so on. Contracts with the company that produced the coffee roaster for the beans and the blend that was Coffee Nation. So everything had to be put in place right from day one, and the culture was. I think coffee attracts. It's quite an attractive business.
Yeah.
We were doing something different. Nobody else was doing it, and so we were sort of a band of very energized, focused team. We had a lot of fun. Beers on a Friday night. Our first office was in Highgate Studios in Kentish Town. There's a great pub opposite, so Friday night we'd decamp there, and but it was like a family. It was very exciting.
Describe the culture then.
I think it was very visionary led. It was very purpose led.
Yeah.
I think there was a very clear. It sounds cliche, but it was a very North Star. We were putting great coffee wherever you are, 24/7. It was about we'll bring the coffee to you. You don't need to go to a coffee bar. And so, it was easy for people to say what the company did that they worked for, and easy to get excited about it and inspired and so on. So there was a high level of energy. We worked hard. We put in the long hours, and there was a big opportunity to play for. So it was a lot of fun.
Now, at some stage, I would imagine you had to bring in talent to the company. How do you go about finding, discovering, hiring, onboarding, and nurturing the talent that really helped take you to the next level?
Yeah. So at the senior level, it was through. So our CFO, she came through our private equity firm. She was recommended to us by them. My operations director, that was via another introduction. So did incredibly well because we built a very effective board, and we were together for over a decade and worked extremely well together. And we then used some recruitment firms and headhunters, but we spent a lot of time with those firms. We didn't just give them a quick brief and then let them get on with it. We really brought them into the company. We took them to locations. We really got them to understand what we were about. Feel the energy, feel the culture, feel the passion. And then it was some other sort of slightly left field routes as well. My operations director, he told me about somebody who worked in his local wine store, but just displayed exceptional customer service.
Amazing.
So we met him, and he was very excited about what we were doing, and he joined us and was with us for many years. So it was a variety of methods, really. But we never. It's interesting. We never wanted people to come for a job. We wanted people to come because they got what we were doing and what we were about, and they're excited about it. And there was an evangelism, a cult-like status to what we were doing. We wanted to be seen as a challenger brand, creating a new category, and so it attracted a certain kind of individual. And we hardly ever looked at, we didn't look at academic qualifications or traditional career route. It was all about the attitude.
Hiring for attitude, training for aptitude.
Yeah, exactly. What people needed to learn, they learned.
Yeah. Did you find then that there was a few competitors who looked over the fence and thought, actually, quite like to see what these guys are doing? Do you have and sort of anyone else who suddenly came into your space in this category that you created?
We sort of had two. We were sort of two-faced here. On the one hand, we were paranoid, absolutely paranoid about somebody coming in. I remember somebody taking photographs of one of our very early trial locations in a Texaco store in Clerkenwell, and I literally followed this lady down the street and said, "Excuse me, why are you taking that photograph?" And she was a design student. I didn't need to worry. She was just intrigued by the design of it. On the one hand, there was a paranoia about competition, but on the other hand, we really didn't worry too much about competition. We were eyes front, and we just wanted to move very fast and secure a bridgehead into the market, kind of before anybody else woke up. So there were other people that, of course, in time saw what we were doing. Obviously, we were very visible in grocery stores and convenience stores and so on. So it did attract some competitors. However, it looked relatively simple on the outside to do what we did, but operationally it was fiendishly complex. You're selling a cup of coffee, you've got fresh beans, milk, you're steaming it, you've got high pressure, high temperatures, boiling hot water, and you're doing this 24/7 often, and also in locations where we didn't have our own dedicated staff. And every cup of coffee had to be just as good as the last one. And that's complex. So a few came in, but nobody ever succeeded in tackling.
Yeah. So earlier on, you mentioned the investment with private equity. At what stage, Martyn, did they then start to think we are going to look to exit this business, and what were the preparations that then started to unfold in terms of helping the company get exit ready?
Yeah. So when they invested, it's a 10-year fund, like they normally are.
Yeah.
It was 3 years in, so we had 5 years really. We had a 5-year plan, and of course the truth is everything takes longer and costs a bit more in business than you think it will. So it actually took 7 years, nearly over 7 years to get an exit. But you got to remember, we were going from almost startup, and to get to deliver private equity level returns from that standing start is extremely difficult. And we did it, and we created a 4x return. But there's a bit of a myth about private equity that it's easy to acquire, and it's but the rate of growth is required is so high. Otherwise, they might as well put their money in the bank, basically. So we started. We were only sort of 4 years into the growth of the business when we started down the exit path, and we had Deloitte for our advisors, And yeah, uh, we went out to a broad range of potential bidders, and the idea was that the key priority, the aim was to create an exit for the PE investors, and get them their return.
Yeah. So what were sort of the various value drivers that you could pull on in order to help?
Yeah, so we were in a high growth market
Yeah.
that had no indication of slowing down.
Mm.
Coffee bar chains, Starbucks had entered the UK, Costa were becoming visible, Nero had launched and was growing. All these companies were putting their drink prices up. The consumer was, lapping up. Coffee was always in the news. We were doing something that was very different. We created a new category within this. We had no direct competitors, and we also had long-term contracts with major retailers. So
Yeah.
one of the big breakthroughs was our contract with Tesco, and we rolled out to hundreds of Tesco Express stores. And we were exclusive. None of these retailers could put any other form of self-serve coffee in their stores. So it gave a significant security over the future cash flows of the business. And we became very profitable.
Very neat. And in terms of your experience of having PE talent around you, how did that help or hinder the whole exit process?
Well, the company wouldn't have existed and wouldn't have scaled. We needed a lot of money up front,
Mm.
and it wouldn't have been possible to do it with business angel funds. It needed a
Yeah.
plug of capital,
Yeah.
and that enabled us to grow quickly. And private equity, they gave us that pathway. Great relationship throughout. There were some challenges at the exit, but all exits have their challenges.
Yeah.
I realize there's a big difference between growing a successful company and selling a successful company or creating
Yeah.
it.
Yeah.
But yeah, it was very successful.
And I guess from being the founder, one of the things I suppose that was another value driver, Martin, is you're not no longer being dependent on the founder. How do you start extricating yourself from the day-to-day running of the business?
I was I was always encouraged by my chair to delegate and
Mm.
get great people around me.
Yeah.
And the truth is that I created the concept, I proved it, I come up with the category, the business model, but thereafter it was about building a team.
Yeah.
And my bit was really being the holder of that vision, knowing intuitively what was right and what was wrong for the company, what we should do, what we shouldn't do. But the execution, the deliverability, the operations, that was all through other people, through building a great team. And so, my ongoing piece was really about brand, products,
Yeah.
marketing, opening doors for big retailers. And it's very easy. It's very easy to get distracted or blown off course, or many people, they'll chase the revenue in the short term. But there's is it the right revenue? And there were a number of occasions when we could have, just agreed to a deal, but it wasn't the right thing for us. And that could have really scuppered the company. So I held on to that piece,
Yeah.
but actually in terms of execution and making it all work on the ground, that was through having great people around me. And I think, it was an awesome team.
Because it's right, it's very easy to take your eye off the ball when you suddenly get into an exit process. So how did you keep your performance high with the business and the team steady while it was in
We
motion?
Well, I focused on the exit, and my COO, he continued to focus on running of the company day to day.
Okay.
But to be honest, and this is part of the challenge with any exit process. You submit a plan. This is what's going to happen, and then if as is normal, perhaps a rollout with a client or with a customer goes a bit slower than anticipated, or that deal doesn't come off, but this one does, or whatever. That raises all sorts of questions in the buyer's mind, and that's part of the navigating the exit journey.
Yeah.
So it's not a straightforward case of, okay, I'll focus on the exit and you focus on running the company. There has to be that focus. You can't drop the ball, but the potential buyers want to hear about how we do it, not just what we do.
Yeah.
It
Look,
involved everybody around the table.
yeah. How do you ultimately settle on the company you're going to sell to?
Deliverability. So
Yeah.
they were able to complete. They delivered on price. They didn't chip the price,
Yeah.
and they were able to, move in a sensible timescale.
Yeah.
And deliverability is what it's all about.
One of the things that when you and I caught up recently, we talked and you were on a panel really with other founders who had exited and talking really candidly and openly and maybe emotionally about what it's like once you sold your company, once you sold your baby. I guess what did you learn about your identity, sort of your own purpose and what success actually feels like day to day after you made the sale?
I think that it was very bittersweet. To be honest, the exit. I'd not planned on exiting at that point,
Mm,
but for a range of reasons, it then appeared the best route for me because I could exit cleanly alongside
yeah.
the private equity investors. I knew they were most focused on price, so that protected me, if you like.
Mm,
So it was somewhat bittersweet. It was, I look back now, or it took me a few years before I could really see how successful we'd been and I had been in actually achieving a good exit. Is so incredibly rare. The statistics of how many
yeah.
companies that raise
Yeah.
VC funding or PE, early stage, the failure rate is so high. And to have built the board, kept the team together, not succumb to competitors, and so on, and achieved a successful exit was phenomenal. And that set me up for the next stage of my life. But at the time, it was difficult to see that, and my purpose and identity was so wrapped up with Coffee
Yeah.
Nation. So it took considerable time afterwards to, I suppose, decouple myself from that and start to move on and actually appreciate what I'd done.
From your perspective, what are the top three things you advise founders to do maybe 12, 24 months before an exit to increase both the value of the company and reduce the stress?
Well, I think having broad shoulders across your leadership team
Yeah.
is certainly one. I think you clearly need to be delivering on the plan, so people look back. They look back 3 years, they look at the current year, and they look forward at the year ahead kind of thing. So
Yeah.
you've got to be broadly on track. I mean, we were never really hitting the budget; we were either behind it or ahead of it. But we were growing quickly, and we were on track in terms of delivering against our overall vision. And I think I'd also say look after yourself. It's extremely hard work. It's very emotional. It's very draining exit processes, and you don't know what you don't know. Uh, Investors, whether it's somebody buying the company or whether it's you've got institutional shareholders and they're selling, they
Yeah.
do this all the time. So having really good advice, professional advice that is there for you and you alone, I'd say is also jolly important.
Tell me a bit more about that then. What sort of advisors you had? Obviously, you've got your chairman and you got the guys from the PS.
Yeah,
But
there's
what other advisors did you lean into to
well,
help
of
you?
course, you see, there's the company's lawyers, but they're representing the company.
Yeah.
Um, Other board members, again, even one's chairperson. Uh, they are also there to represent. Yes, they're looking after. They want to look after the interests of the management team, but also their fiduciary responsibilities to all shareholders.
Yeah.
And particularly to institutional shareholders. So having someone that is there just for you and gives you a voice and gives you strength, because it becomes very grinding. It's
Yeah.
very, it's a tough path. So that's right. So I'd certainly advise that.
Yeah. And also, I suppose. when it comes to determining what great looks like after the sale, obviously some people they need to stay on for a bit, and that's part of the post exit deal. Others maybe not. So how did you determine what a great exit was going to look like for you personally? What were the things that were
I think it was kind of determined for me to some extent.
okay?
Because as I said, I decided to then exit alongside the
Yeah,
private equity investor. So it was clean, it was neat,
yeah,
uh, and um, and in many ways the timing was good because it was 6 months before Lehman's
yeah,
crash. So it gave me a clean break. So and of course earnouts can be jolly challenging because there's lots of things you don't have control over. And of course, if the price is driven up off the back of future growth potential, then of course the incumbent management team, if you're staying on, you've got to deliver that.
yeah, yeah. So a lot of what we've been speaking about today, you then encapsulated in your book, Wake Up and Sell the Coffee. What prompted you to write that? I mean, because was it just cathartic? Was it just sort of really to sort of get down all the trials and tribulations, or was there a deeper purpose to writing the book?
Yeah, I think post exit, as I gradually sort of re-emerged and started, getting back out, look at what I was going to do next.
Yeah,
I met lots of other people who were leading and growing and starting businesses. And I think that one of the things that really struck me was that for some reason I thought a lot of the mistakes I'd made up front, trying to build a business before you've proved the model,
yeah,
etc. I thought everybody will know this stuff by now. And then I realized, crumbs, they don't. And so I thought actually, writing a book could be a good way of sharing my experience and my journey. And and Coffee Nation was a pretty visible brand. We had 600 locations when I sold. We'd served 100 million customers. We had people who would call or email or whatever and really telling us how much they loved what we were doing, or if we dropped the ball, they'd tell us equally because
yeah,
it mattered them, which was great. So I thought actually, if I wrote a book that told the warts and all story, but also something about how to learn some of the lessons of what I got wrong, I
yeah,
thought it would be a worthwhile exercise, and it landed very well. So yeah, I think it was my way of contributing, giving something back to the entrepreneurial community in the UK. I think there was also a lot of talk about startup Britain in the late sort of 2010s, and starting up is just is kind of, yeah, you've got to start well, and that's also part of what I wanted to get across in the book. But it's then about how do you go from startup to to really growing and reaching profitability and scaling,
yeah, yeah.
building the team and so on.
What do you think, back in reflecting, what would you think are the three, four top lessons that a high growth startup or scale up would have taken from Wake Up and Sell the Coffee?
I think that point about don't try and grow a business until you've proved the concept. I think that's the
Yeah,
first thing. I think the
yeah,
second thing is, uh, you know, so many businesses are started off a very flimsy thesis of what problem they're solving or what they're bringing to the world. Um, as was mine. Instant coffee in a corner shop was never going to set the world on fire. And and I think people that vastly overestimate um, the the importance or the significance of what they're doing. You've got to find something that really is can really be something. Jumping on a bandwagon that already exists, is rarely a good strategy. Um, Unless you're doing something in a very high growth market and you can be one of a number of players. Cafe Nero, for example, hugely successful early stage of the coffee bar market, and they became one of the big success stories. So yeah, I think they're the key things really.
yeah, yeah. So, what do you spend your time doing now?
So after Coffee Nation, very quickly I was asked to go and help other companies, help them scale, help them build their teams, help them navigate all the challenges of being an entrepreneur and a founder. And I think the book then helped with that as well.
Yeah,
So coaching, mentoring, But really being there for the founder or the CEO, I've got a lot of scars on my back. I've got the success stories, but lots of learning and wisdom, and helping them. And it's often asking them the right questions. They know the answers usually, even if they're not admitting it to themselves, and nudging them in the right direction. So I love doing that, working with companies, helping them, achieve their goals, and then chairing some peer learning groups of CEOs as well.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Yeah. And I imagine you find that very rewarding.
I do indeed. Yeah, it's
Yeah.
not. It's
Yeah.
and
No,
we need more successes in the UK for sure.
100%. Yeah. Well, I think when our paths first crossed, you came and joined the Scaling Up Masters program in London as our kind of ambassador for a while. And it was great to have your just straight up stories that you were able to tell. I think we had maybe 5 or 6 CEOs on each of those programs, and yeah, it was great to have that kickoff. Where were we in near? Well, definitely on the side of the Thames at Temple, wasn't it?
That's right. Yeah, yeah, yeah. I remember
Yeah, Arundel House. Yeah, great times. Final question. Final question. What book or audio book are you reading or listening to at the moment, and why?
the book that really changed everything for me in business, that I read in the dark early days when I was running out of money and it wasn't working. It was a little book called The 22 Immutable Laws of Marketing. It's been updated many times, but that talks about the law of the category and the law of leadership, and that is, it's better to be first than it is to be better. Set up in a space in a category that you can own, and therefore lead. And that really, sparked the idea for me that I needed to, this was about creating something entirely new.
Yeah.
And that book was life changing for me. And
Very
another
cool.
book I'd highly
Yeah.
recommend is a book called Play Bigger, co-authored by Kevin Maley. And again, this is all about category design, and it's a sort of seminal work on that subject. And if you look at most hugely successful businesses, particularly in the consumer space, what they've done is very obvious with hindsight, but at the start, they were swimming against the tide. They were laughed out of the room. They were seen to be crazy. So things like Airbnb or Uber or whatever.
Yeah.
They create entirely new categories in their own right. And Play Bigger is an incredible book. Sure.
Martyn, so many thanks for joining us on today's podcast. As ever, fascinating story into the challenges and tribulations of someone growing and building out, scaling a company, and what it takes to successfully exit, both the emotional toll it takes and the way that you have to think about that. So many great insights. So once again, thank you so much.
Thank you to you, sir.